In this video, I'm going to show you the game between Hikaru Nakamura and Fabiano Caruana. Let's just take a quick look at the standings after seven rounds at the halfway stage of this Candidates Tournament 2026. Sindarov out in the lead, a point and a half clear of Caruana. So, Caruana still has a chance to try and catch up. Will nerves get to Sindarov? And Hikaru Nakamura, well, he's on -2. Lost 2 games and drawn a few. So, yeah, he's really struggling. But in this game, he has white against Caruana, and actually, he has a pretty good score with white against Caruana. So let's see. Can he put some pressure on Caruana? Will he put too much pressure on Caruana? Will Caruana somehow find his way to another win? Let's take a look at the game. Nakamura opened with c4. And yeah, it's a proper English line. I mean, pretty well known. Exchange in the middle and e6. This is a really well-known position. So kind of solid start for both players. And bishop f4. And Caruana breaks with d5. It's all very classical. Knight takes d5, and we get an exchange of pieces. And bishop d2. So the bishop comes back to protect that knight. And you can see that black's structure has just been damaged a little bit. However, of course, black has very decent play with the pieces. Queen a4, that's a little bit unusual, but it has been seen before. Played by some notable players, for example, Hans Niemann, Artemiev, so there we go. It can't be that bad. And Hikaru played it pretty quickly. Now a5, that's actually a new move. But Caruana thought for 20 minutes over that one. So yeah, put some work in at the board. If that pawn is taken, then bishop to e7 and black gets some nice compensation, as black has a lot of piece play after that, but there's no need to take the pawn. And actually, e4 played very quickly by Nakamura. He'd obviously anticipated this move, and not a big deal. So knight takes, pawn takes, the bishop came back. Again, there's no need to take the pawn on c6. That just gives black very easy development and decent compensation for the pawn. So instead, Nakamura just played bishop e2. Got to move the bishop before you castle. Bishop a6. Caruana happy to exchange pieces. And castle. So we can take stock of the position after both sides have castled. Well, the computer says this position is just equal. But it's obviously more comfortable for white from a human viewpoint. Because look, rook on the open file. This rook looks a bit silly on a6. Bishop on f4 is a little bit more active than that one. So yeah, it's definitely more comfortable for white. Easier to play. Queen b5. Of course, Caruana wants to exchange pieces. Bishop c5. Okay, activates that bishop. But white is still better here. I mean, this is the basic difference between the two sides. If I could just teleport that rook to d8, then it would be pretty easy for black to equalize, but with the rook on a6, not so simple. Queen e7. Okay, the queen wants to come down the d file. And now Caruana played f6, which is okay. But in general, if you move that f pawn, then it weakens the 7th rank and also weakens that e pawn. I think h6 is a better move. And if queen d7, the queen pops out, and actually the activity of the queen I think gives black sufficient counterplay there. But f6 isn't bad. Bishop d6, some exchanges. Rook and pawn endgame. But again, white is better here. Just because we've got an active rook. This rook is still poorly placed on a6. Hits this pawn. So Caruana has to play accurately. Should still be okay. He played rook b8 and just gave that pawn. And then played rook b2. I mean, he could have played king f7 here. But, okay, rook b2. Also reasonable. Time, I should mention, we're on move 26. Time was not an issue for either player. And rook b6. Good idea. Good to activate that rook. Rook a7. Yep, and rook takes a2. h3. This is still a little bit tricky for black, because if white gets time to play rook d1 and rook d7, then that'll be fatal. So black needs to take care here. And it's at this moment that Caruana made a mistake. In this position, he should play rook here and simply give that pawn and then put the rook back on b7 to cover the 7th rank. Now, this isn't simple. You know, white is a clear pawn up and this rook is very active. But there's a really nice defense, actually. Okay, so first of all, rook e2. And then you don't bother recapturing the pawn straight away, but just gain some space on the king side. And, well, black is going to recover one of the pawns, and that should be sufficient to make a draw. But yeah, not absolutely simple, there's no doubt about it. But Caruana got his move order a bit twisted. He played h5. I mean, in principle, it's a good idea. But watch what happens now. Rook d1. Now it's too late to block on the 7th rank. There's no rook on b2. So rook bb2. So Caruana is counterattacking. A rook check. And rook d7. So Nakamura breaks through on g7. Now, of course, generally you want to step up the board, but this would just lose to h4, and that threatens mate in a couple. So, for example, a4, check, and that's checkmate. And in this position, well, black is just lost. I mean, you can escape with f5, but then this here, pawn rolls, white is winning. Of course, absolutely crucial in these variations that g2 is covered by the rook. So white's king is safe enough. So let's go back here. So Caruana had to play king h8. So a check, and rook ag7, king f8, another check. Now here is where Caruana played king to g8. It's hard to say what he missed in all these variations, but I just want to show you what would happen if black played king e8 here. So Caruana did not play this. However, here is my question for you. It's time for a think and drink moment. How would you play in this position? White to move and win. White to move and win. Okay. Time for me to have a drink. Time for you to have a think. See you after this message. Do you want to improve your chess? Get access to live masterclasses with yours truly? Then subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, and for just $25 a month, you get a newsletter with a test game, calculation puzzles, a monthly opening survey,
access to an archive with over 100 opening surveys. And you can join in live masterclasses exclusive to patrons where you can ask me questions directly over Zoom. All for only $25 per month. Do subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess and join the club.
This is a well-known idea in double rook endgames. So there's only one winning move here, apart from the repeating checks. And that's rook b7. Okay, two different checkmates threatened. So rook takes g2. Now clearly king h1 does no good at all. So king f1. The king runs all the way across to the other side of the board. I mean, black can do nothing better than check. And it finds safety on b1, covered by the rook, which controls the b2 square. As I said, it's actually a very common winning technique in these double rook endgames with rooks on the 7th. Okay, very nice. So Caruana played king g8. A check on g7 and rook g6. So the rook covers the pawn on g2, and yeah, this f6 pawn is under fire. So rook f4 takes, king g7 takes here. I mean, it's really nothing that black can do actually. If the a pawn is pushed, then the rook will just go behind the pawn. Essentially, black is going to end up in a position where he's 2 pawns down with pawns on all on the king side. And there really is no defense here. So these pawns exchanged. And now this is very nice. The rook just shuffles around. Rook f4, excellent move. So white threatens to exchange rooks on g4. And there is really nothing that black can do here. So the king basically is going to get out, and there's a key move that we're going to see any moment. No, a little bit of shuffling first. Here we go. We get to it. That's the key position with the rook on f4. I think Nakamura could have got there perhaps a little bit earlier, but anyway, the point is that if you imagine the king isn't there, black's king cannot cross the f-file to blockade the e-pawn. It can't attack the rook because the pawn covers g5. So basically the king is stuck. So now white's task is just to bring the king round here, attack the rook and support the e-pawn, and there is absolutely nothing that black can do here. And that's basically what happened. Okay, Nakamura did that one first, and he even improved the position of the rook. But essentially it's the same position, with the pawn and the rook just shutting the king out of place, and now he's ready to advance again. And here Caruana resigned. I mean, there really is nothing he can do. So let me just give you a typical variation. So, well, if rook a4, then actually you can just advance the e-pawn straight away. And if rook a3, then the king just marches up the board. And you can see it can hide on f6. If there's a check here, then the pawn advances. And if, let's say, king g7, well, you can just push the pawn. And now the king, well, it'll come around to g5, basically. And there's nothing to be done there. Here, you can advance and rook here and wins. So let's just go back to the position where Nakamura resigned. Excuse me, where Caruana resigned. Nakamura won the game. So, wow. They have such a rivalry, and Caruana doesn't play well with black against Nakamura. And that's happened in quite a few of their recent games where Nakamura has just got this very slight advantage. He's so good in technical positions. And Caruana just kind of lets it slip. So let's take a look at the standings. Well, in the other games, Sindarov drew against Yesipienko. So Sindarov had black, played very solidly. So Sindarov, you can see there on 6.5. Now, because Caruana lost, that means he's now 2 points behind Sindarov. Sindarov 6.5. Caruana and Giri now on 4.5. Anish Giri defeated Prague. If you haven't seen my other video, do check that out. Giri won a very nice game against Prague. So 6.5 Sindarov, Caruana and Giri 4.5. And well, Nakamura, having won that game, is still under 50%. He's on 3.5 along with Bluebaum, Prague and Wei Yi, with Yesipienko at the bottom on 2.5. So let's just take a quick look at the pairings for tomorrow. So round 9, Nakamura, Yesipienko, Caruana, Giri. That should be a good game. Prague against Wei and Bluebaum against Sindarov. I look forward to reporting on that one. Don't forget, my Chessable courses are on sale right now during the candidates if you want a good system against e4. Thanks for watching.